Welcome to Duggar Family News. JINGER shares emotional story about daughter's health emergency. JINGER recently shared a deeply emotional experience during a podcast episode with her husband, Jeremy Vuolo. The couple opened up about a night that brought them face to face with one of the scariest moments any parent can imagine. A sudden health emergency involving their young daughter, Evangeline. The incident occurred late at night around 10:30 p.m., when JINGER heard what initially sounded like a normal cough. But as she quickly went to check on Evangeline, she realized something was wrong. The coughing was more intense than usual, and it became clear that their daughter was having trouble breathing. JINGER described the fear and panic that swept through their home in those moments. There had been no prior signs that something was wrong. Evangeline had seemed fine earlier in the day. The suddenness of the situation caught both parents off guard, forcing them to rely entirely on their instincts and each other. JINGER recalled her own childhood experiences with asthma, which added another layer of concern and urgency. However, this episode didn't resemble what she remembered from her own experiences. It felt more intense and more immediate. Unsure of the cause, whether it was an allergic reaction, a blockage, or something else, they acted fast. As the couple rushed to get help, the fear of not knowing what was happening weighed heavily on them. JINGER shared how overwhelming it felt to see her child in distress and to not have immediate answers. But in that chaos, Jeremy's steady presence was a source of calm and strength. They leaned on each other, working together to ensure Evangeline got the care she needed. At the hospital, medical staff quickly assessed the situation. The issue appeared to be related to either a food-related obstruction or a reaction that impacted her breathing. Fortunately, the treatment was effective, and Evangeline's condition improved rapidly. JINGER reflected on how grateful they were for the quick response from the medical team, and for the strength they found in each other during those difficult moments. While the experience was incredibly frightening, it also served as a reminder of the unpredictability of life and the importance of staying alert to even mild symptoms in children. In sharing this story, JINGER emphasized the value of staying calm, trusting your instincts, and not hesitating to seek professional help when something feels wrong. She also expressed gratitude for the supportive family and the importance of being able to lean on a partner during challenging times. This experience, while difficult, brought with it valuable lessons about parenting, teamwork, and resilience. Through her story, JINGER hopes to encourage other parents to remain attentive, trust their intuition, and never take their children's health for granted. JINGER's emotional journey through a child's health scare. It was an ordinary Tuesday night in the Vuolo household. The soft hum of the baby monitor blended with the sounds of the Los Angeles suburbs, and the day's tasks had finally quieted. JINGER sat on the couch, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, her feet tucked beneath her. Across the room, Jeremy flipped through a book, the room wrapped in a kind of peaceful stillness that parents treasure after a full day with little ones. Then a cough, sharp, sudden, piercing, cut through the air. JINGER paused. That wasn't an unfamiliar sound. Toddlers cough all the time. But something in her heart tugged, a quiet nudge that mothers know too well. She set her cup down, already on her feet. "I'll go check on her," she said, not quite panicked, but uneasy. As she reached the nursery, she heard another cough. This one was louder, strained. When she opened the door, she found Evangeline sitting up in her crib, her face red, eyes wide and struggling. "Sweetheart," JINGER whispered, rushing forward. "It's okay. Mommy's here." But it wasn't okay. Evangeline's small chest heaved as she tried to breathe. It wasn't just a cough anymore. It was labored, frantic. Panic rippled through JINGER's body like a jolt of electricity. She called for Jeremy. Within seconds, he was at her side, scooping their daughter into his arms as they assessed the situation with growing urgency. Her breaths were shallow and quick. Her color had started to pale. And worst of all, she couldn't seem to get enough air. "We need to go," Jeremy said firmly. There was no debate, no hesitation. Jinger grabbed her phone and car keys while Jeremy wrapped Evangeline in a blanket. In the car, every red light felt like an eternity. Jinger sat in the back seat beside Evangeline, whispering words of comfort, praying, trying to keep her own breathing steady. The uncertainty was suffocating. Was it an allergic reaction? Did something get stuck in her airway? Was it something worse? She thought of all the times she had held her daughter close, of all the bedtime songs and quiet moments. And now, faced with something beyond her control, she felt helpless. At the emergency room, the medical staff acted quickly. Evangeline was taken for examination, while Jinger and Jeremy waited outside the curtain, waiting, watching, praying. Jinger sat in the cold plastic chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jeremy stood, arms crossed, eyes focused on the curtained area where their daughter was being treated. The sterile smells, the beeping machines, the urgent steps of nurses, it all blurred into a surreal fog. Finally, a doctor emerged. "She's stable now," he said gently. "We believe it was a combination of a minor allergic reaction and some airway irritation, possibly caused by a small obstruction, likely food. She's responded well to the treatment and medication." The wave of relief that swept over Jinger was nearly overwhelming. Tears that she had held back flowed freely now, and Jeremy sat beside her, resting a hand on her back. Evangeline would be okay. That's all that mattered. Later, at home, Jinger lay awake in bed, the events of the night replaying in her mind. Parenthood, she realized, wasn't just about diaper changes, bedtime stories, or milestones. It was about these moments too, the ones you never see coming. The ones that test you in ways you never imagined. She thought about the podcast they were scheduled to record later that week. For a moment, she wondered whether she could talk about something so raw, so recent. But deep down, she knew sharing this story might help others. So a few days later, with Jeremy by her side, Jinger sat before the microphone and told their story, not as a public figure, not as a reality TV name, but as a mother. She described the fear that gripped her chest when Evangeline couldn't catch her breath. She shared the flood of emotions, the racing thoughts, the desperate prayers whispered during that chaotic drive to the hospital. She spoke about what it means to stay calm in a crisis, and how her husband's steady presence kept her grounded. She talked about the terrifying unpredictability of parenting, and how even when you think you're prepared, moments like these remind you just how fragile life can be. Jinger said on the podcast, she was fine that day, laughing, running around. And then suddenly she wasn't. It all changed in a matter of seconds. Listeners responded with messages of support, empathy, and shared stories of their own close calls. The community of parents, many of whom had followed Jinger for years, now saw her in a different light. Not just as a public figure, but as someone who knew the quiet desperation of a mother praying for her child's safety. The days that followed were filled with extra snuggles, whispered thank yous, and a renewed appreciation for the ordinary. Jinger found herself watching Evangeline with new eyes. Every smile, every laugh, every silly toddler moment felt more precious now. That night in the hospital had carved a deep space in her heart, not just of fear, but of fierce gratitude. "I think what I learned most," she later said in an interview, "is how quickly life can shift, and how important it is to be present in the moment, to cherish the calm, because the storms can come without warning." She and Jeremy also made changes. They spoke with Evangeline's pediatrician, consulted an allergist, and took every step to make sure they understood what had happened and how to prevent it in the future. They also began to talk more openly about the realities of parenting, not just the sweet snapshots for social media, but the sleepless nights, the fears, and the moments that change you forever. In their podcast episode titled, "When Everything Changed in a Moment," Jinger concluded with a message for other parents. Don't ignore that feeling when something seems off. You know your child. Trust your instincts. And lean on each other. Because sometimes love looks like action, like racing to the hospital, like sitting through the night by a hospital bed, like refusing to give up even when you're scared. As the spring sun returned to their neighborhood and the routine of daily life resumed, the Volo household slowly settled back into its rhythm. But something had shifted. It was in the way Jinger lingered a little longer at bedtime, brushing Evangeline's hair with her fingers. It was in the extra glance Jeremy gave their daughter when buckling her into her car seat. It was in the unspoken gratitude that hung in the air each morning when she woke up and saw her little girl, healthy and smiling. That night would never leave them, but it had given them something too. Perspective, gratitude, strength, and above all, a reminder that life's most important moments are the ones we often take for granted until they are almost taken from us.